I want to begin with a very simple question. What makes a story? It's a clash between ambition and achievement. And you'll see that every single story in the world is basically rooted in conflict. Good artists are always able to say so much in so little. That's an idea that I really believe strongly in. That you don't have to be very skillful. Art is not all about craft. A lot of it is just soul. If you can do it instinctively, if you can do it with sincerity, and you can do it with conviction, then it's gonna appeal to people. This writing workshop, so to say, is called 7 Words on Storytelling, and I'm gonna take you through 7 ideas that I think make up the crux of storytelling. All right, can somebody tell me what makes a story? What is like the key ingredient of a story? I think we all know what stories. We know what stories are, right? It teaches a moral. Okay, what's your name? Veda. Okay, Veda says it teaches a moral. Do you guys agree with that? But there are some stories that may not teach a moral, right? Have you seen Breaking Bad? Is there a moral there? Maybe not. So some other. I want some other answers. What makes a story? That's a good idea, and I'll come back to that. The idea of morals. We'll come back to that. Veda's idea of morals. But any other answers? Or what makes a story? Content? Words. Okay. But we can have words and not have a story. It's a good day. My name is Saurabh. Is that a story? Those are words, but that's not a story. Experience. Yeah, that's a good word. Experience. But you can have an experience and not have a story. You know how? You can wake up in the morning, you can brush your teeth and come to college. Is that a story? That's not really a story. That's boring. We've done morals, we've done words, we've done experience. All right. So we've figured out that experience is not a story. But imagine this. You wake up in the morning, you go to brush your teeth, there's no toothpaste. You fight with your family, and like, kya ghatiya ghar, and you say all of those stuff. And you come to college, maybe you meet your partner, something happens, and the next thing you know, you've broken up. Is that a story? Yeah, that's a story. So what's the element that is missing in the first one and the second one? Yeah, sorry? Drama. That's a good word. What's your name? Hari Krishna. Okay, Hari Krishna says the element of drama is there. But what exactly makes drama? Drama is basically conflict. That's a good word. We can say conflict is similar to drama. Conflict is essentially that there's something that you want and you're not getting that. It's a difference between an ambition and achievement. In the Colgate basic experience, you just wanted to wake up and brush your teeth and come to college. There is no sense of conflict. You got what you wanted. But in a story, what happens essentially is that you want something, there's a certain ambition, and the achievement is not there. So it's a kind of a tussle, it's a kind of a war between these two things, the desire and the reality. So conflict is basically that. It's a clash between ambition and achievement. And you'll see that every single story in the world is basically rooted in conflict. You know Romeo and Juliet? There are a lot of variations of Romeo and Juliet, even in modern day. That is also a sense of conflict. They're lovers and their parents don't allow them to get together, either because of their family feuds or because of, in Indian settings, it can be religion, it can be caste. So that is also some kind of conflict. This is Parasite. Have you seen Parasite? Yeah, so Parasite is again a sense of class conflict. Class conflict at different classes, and their characters and their behaviors are driven by class. And there's again a very literal sort of conflict. Sometimes conflict can be also very internal. Have you seen Three of Us? Three of Us is a very beautiful film. You should check it out. What's happening there is the lady, she's got dementia and she's slowly losing her memory. And she goes to her childhood hometown. And she goes basically to visit her. She meets her old friends and the teachers that she was taught by in school, and she meets her old lover and stuff and so on and so forth. It's basically the conflict is very internal. It's in terms of what is happening in her mind, the fading of the memories, and what she's seeing in front of her. So conflict can be, basically my point here was कि किस type का conflict हो सकता है. The different kinds of conflict. You can have a very literal conflict, which is a war. You can have a conflict where the characters want something but society wouldn't allow them. You can have class conflict. You can have conflict that is internal, right? Let's go to the next slide. Yeah. So one of the good ways of looking at conflict is to look at the log line of your favorite films or your shows. Now here's the log line that I really like. A chemistry teacher diagnosed with inoperable lung cancer turns to manufacturing and selling drugs with a former student to secure his family's future. Do you know what that is? Yeah, Breaking Bad, exactly. So, one of the good exercises that I'll tell you all to do is to go home to your favorite films and your favorite shows and basically look up the log lines. Log line का मतलब क्या होता है कि एक लाइन में they try to basically capture the essence of the show या film का जो भी essence है. And this is what we do. We writers do use the log lines to pitch to producers. We say, this is the idea that I have, and this is what I want to make. And you can say a good log line will immediately sell the entire story because the main conflict is already there. There's a chemistry teacher, he gets cancer. So we know he's going to die, right? He has to do something to make money. So he starts selling drugs, and you know what happens in Breaking Bad after that, right? So one of the good things you can do is, as I said, go home and look up the log lines of all your favorite films and shows. Like for example, a group of boys go on an adventure and one of them falls in a Guna cave and the rest of them have to rescue him. Manjumal boys. You know the story, right? If you know the essential conflict, you know how it can be a 10 season series, it can be a single 90-minute film, it can be a 90-second reel. If you know the conflict, it will sort of become the whole backbone of the story, right? So remember conflict. Conflict is a key ingredient. The second thing I want to talk about is dynamism. Can somebody tell me what dynamism is? Movement? Yeah, that's a good word. Yeah, Veda? Any other? You guys are from technology. I'm sure you know what dynamic is. What is dynamic data structure? Yeah, sorry? Which is responsive. Yeah. Responsive to what? Which changes over time. Yeah, exactly. What's your name? Huh? Page. All right, great. Page says that dynamic is basically something that changes over time. Exactly. Dynamism is the same thing. It is characterized by change and liveliness. Let's read that together. This sentence has 5 words. Here are 5 more words. 5 word sentences are fine, but several together become monotonous. Listen to what is happening. The writing is getting boring. The sound of it drones. It's like a stuck record. The ear demands some variety. Now listen. I vary the sentence lengths and I create music. Music. The writing sings. It has a pleasant rhythm, a lilt, a harmony. I use short sentences and I use certain sentences of medium length. And I sometimes, when I'm certain that the reader is rested, I will engage him with a sentence of considerable length, a sentence that burns with the energy and builds with all the impetus of a crescendo, the roll of the drums, the crash of the cymbals, sounds that say, listen to this is important. So write with a combination of short, medium, and long sentences. Create a sound that pleases the reader's ear. Don't just write words, write music. That's a beautiful passage. A lot of this you will see when we were little students, we were studying writing. That really helps to get an idea of, oh wow, yeah, it makes immediate sense. So like when you were probably in middle school, this is how you'd probably write. You would write with like, oh, my name is Sourabh and I live in Bilaspur, Chhattisgarh. I do this, that. But it's variety is the spice of life, you know. Every time you're doing any sort of performance, any sort of storytelling, you have to always make sure that things are dynamic. And you'll see this in not just like music or writing, you'll see this in every single art form. You'll see this in filmmaking, for example. Can somebody tell me the difference between these shots? People who are interested in films, cameras, and so on. Okay, let's say if I was making a film, let's say we were making a film, would you open with this shot or that shot? You'll open with the first shot, right? What's your name? Joharika. We met last time, right? Joharika. Why would you open with the first shot, Joharika? That seems interesting. Why not the second shot? It's just people. But you're right, Joharika. You're instinctively right. Why do we start always with the first shot? It creates suspense. Yeah, in a way you can say that. But even people can be मतलब उसमें भी suspense हो सकता है. It's not necessary. Let's say we were making a film of this room. Would you start with a shot of me directly here? Yeah, you want to say something? Exactly. What's your name? Huh? Vega. Okay, we have had Veda and now we have Vega. Okay, great. So Vega says you want to show the setting. Exactly. You usually open in films. This is not necessary, but usually the grammar of visual. हम भी train हो चुके हैं इस visual grammar में. That's why Joharika exactly said we will open with the first shot because that's what we think. Naturally, films are like that. We open with the setting. We open with a wide shot, which is not necessary, but usually happens. You open with a wide shot. This is called a wide shot, where The character is rather small, he's not very big, but it is the setting. This is from The Martian. The Martian is a film based in Mars, obviously. So you want to emphasize the setting, right? It starts from there. And this is from a different movie. This is called a cowboy or a medium shot, right? You can have a wide shot and a medium shot, and then you can have a medium close up, and then you can have an extreme close up. So basically, the idea there was basically that in films, we don't really notice it too much, but there's such a huge variety of shots. For example, if we were shooting a film here, we would start with a wide shot. वहाँ से एक दिख रहा है कि अच्छा audience है. There's somebody speaking on the stage, and then maybe there might be a medium shot of me speaking from here to here, and then somebody, if there's an audience interaction, there might be a medium shot of them, a short reverse shot, right? So basically, I wanted to tell you how everything in films is also very dynamic. Even when you're doing like single take shots, like if you've seen Adolescence, have you seen Adolescence, the recent Netflix show? Great show. Check it out. It is taken in a single take, but even then, there's just so much movement. The acting performance is great. Basically, the idea is you have to create dynamism in different forms. You can do it through words, you can do it through music, and in cinema, you do it through shots. This, by the way, is a great guide on different kinds of shots that there are. Studio Binder is a great website you can check out. For those of you who are interested in filmmaking, these three channels, Studio Binder, Lessons from the Screenplay, and Nerd Writer, they're all great channels to learn filmmaking. But basically, the second word was dynamism, change. You have to constantly bring variety. The third word is rootedness. Can somebody tell me what is rootedness? From where we are taking the inspiration of the story? Partially, but I'm just asking the rooted in a very literal sense. What do you mean by rootedness? Where you belong to, right? Joharika, exactly. Who you are and where you come from. And that I feel is a very important part of storytelling. Sometimes, in this age of globalization and digital media, we think, oh, we have to always make things for the international audience, always try to appeal to this sort of masses or this sort of algorithm that we're doing. But to be honest, good art is always rooted in who you are. And this is a lovely passage from one of my favorite writers, Vinod Kumar Shukla. He says, the more local you are, the more global you will be. If you bring the vastness of your local into the vastness of the global, that would be the greatest universality of all. You must preserve your localism, the life you lived, your childlikeness, the geography of your childhood. One should keep returning to it. One should keep remembering it. He's a wonderful Hindi novelist. He wrote that दीवार में एक खिड़की रहती है बहुत खूबसूरत एक novel. And what he's basically saying here is you don't become global by pretending to be global. You can't just say, oh, I'll write something that appeals to everybody. You can't do that. Instead, you should fall back upon and double down on your localness, on your rootedness. And you should write stories that are very authentic, very rooted to you. इसका एक बहुत practical reason है. Simple practical एक reason है कि that's how you create differentiation, right? कि अगर कोई story Los Angeles में लिखी जा रही है, I can't compete with that by writing a story about Los Angeles, right? Because I've never experienced that. I can write a story about Bilaspur. I can write from where I come from. I can write a story about Delhi. I can go even more specific. I can write a story about a boy who has lived in Chhattisgarh for the first 18 years of his life and has moved to Delhi. So he has this sort of mixed experience of small town and then metro life also. So basically, I'm trying to tell you that preserve your localness. Keep going back to who you are as a person. And this is a great exercise in individuality also, because it helps you figure out, oh, this is who I am. And your stories should be a reflection of that. Great art is always a reflection of your individuality. जो आप बनाओ, अगर वो genuinely sincerity के साथ बना है, if it is sincere and if it is craftful, then nobody will replace it because it is attached to you. It is attached to who you are as an individual in this planet of billions, right? And so here's a little exercise that I think you all, if you are interested in writing and storytelling, and if you want to start this is the best exercise to write a childhood memory. Try to fill 4 pages with a single, maybe 2 or 4 pages with a single childhood memory. And I'll tell you how wonderful it is, not just in terms of like the act of writing, but how much stuff there is in your own life, that there's so much that you can take from, especially because you people are young. You're what, 17, 18? 18, 19, mostly young people, right? So you still have your childhood and it is so vivid, so sharp right now. So go and if you want to start writing, start with the childhood memories. Try to fill 4 pages with just a single childhood memory, and that would be a great exercise. We can try that maybe if we have time later today. Yeah. The fourth thing is intensity. Fourth word out of the 7 words is intensity. Can somebody tell me what intensity is? Intense. That's power. Yeah, something similar. Concentrated. That's a very good word, Veda. Concentrated. Yeah, take it further in terms of storytelling. Concentrated. Kaushik. Okay, great. Kaushik. Yeah, exactly. How strong? What you feel deeply. All of you had the right words. Basically, उस पर feeling मैंने जोड़ दिया. Intensity is basically what you feel deeply. और इसमें my point in this fourth word is that you should always try to write, especially in the beginning, write about something that you feel very deeply, very very deeply. If you feel ये ख्याल तो मेरे जहन दिमाग पूरे सुबह शाम है, and that's why especially when people are young and they meet somebody, you know, at the touch of love, everyone becomes a poet, because the moment you meet somebody, it's like, because you've never had this, you've never felt something with this intensity, that you're waking every day, you wake up, that's what you think about every night you go to sleep. So write about that, write about the person that you're, you know, that you like. And not just that, it's just one feeling. With the problem with love is that, not with love, but writing about love, is that it's a very difficult genre to write something new in, because it's so cliched. Every single movie, every single novel has some element of love, right? So something else that you can do is you can try to write about things you associated with very different emotions. You can take anger, for example. You can take joy. You can take sorrow, and you can take loneliness. Take all of those emotions and try to, like, take a page and write 10 things you associate with every single emotion. And that will take you in 10 different directions. Like, for example, I'm not a very tempered person. Like, I do feel angry about some things. So I usually try to do that. Hey, what do I feel angry about? For me, it was like cinema. When I go to theaters, they play these ads and they just ruin your, like, they keep playing ads for like 15 minutes. Testing your patience, man. Just take 10, 20, whatever extra you want to take. Don't show me ads there, man. But basically things like that. So I made a silly rant reel, or I just try to explore different emotions that I have, and I try to write in accordance to that. So that helps to basically figure out, oh, this is what I feel and this is the direction I want to take in. And you can make different characters out of it also. You can have a character, let's say you have a character which is who is very short tempered. I'm not very short tempered. How do I write that? I'll try to find something within me which makes me very furious, which makes me very angry, and I'll try to channel that for that character, right? So that's the idea. Basically, intensity ka hi tha. Take whatever you feel deeply amongst different emotions and write something out of it, right? Littleness. This is a very obvious word, and if you've seen my work, you will know that I focus a lot on ordinary things, on little things, and that really comes from the kind of artist that I've really liked. Wordsworth basically means keeping it simple, focusing on the little things. Some of the artists that I really admire, Satyajit Ray is one of my favorite filmmakers. Have you seen Satyajit Ray's films? Apu trilogy, yeah, and Charulata and other films. Satyajit Ray again is probably the greatest filmmaker that this country has seen. And his stories, his films are always very, very simple. You'll see that he'll take something like a sibling relationship, just a very small family relationship, and he'll build a story out of that. And I think those stories are always the best, because it is very hard to do things like these. It's very hard to, one of the quotes I really believe in from Michael Arndt, he says, it's easy to do things that are big, noisy, and complicated. It's hard to do things that are small, quiet, and simple. It basically means when you have little to play with, when you have small and simple things, it's harder to tell a story. Because, you know, you don't have all of this jazz. You can do action films with a lot of VFX and all of that crazy stuff, but you can't really do that when you're playing, let's say, when you're doing a story with just, you know, let's say 2 people in a room. It's very difficult to do that. So my focus here on littleness is basically to try to tell stories that are simple, that are rooted in the ordinary. William Wordsworth, you know, you might have studied him in school, Daffodils, and a lot of other poems. His poems are always rooted in nature, in ordinary settings, because his plan was, I'll make the ordinary extraordinary. He said, I'll remove the veil of familiarity from everyday things. जो everyday चीजें हम देखते हैं, उन्हीं को मैं interesting बनाऊंगा. Wordsworth, Coleridge, all of these late 18th century romantic poets, they said we're going to make them extraordinary. And that's what they're trying to do. And I think good art should always try to do that, right? इसका एक simple practical reason है कि हम compete नहीं कर सकते बड़े प्रोडक्शन लेवल्स. फॉर एग्जाम्पल हॉलीवुड, हम इंटरस्टेलर नहीं बना सकते इंडिया में. वी कांट मेक एन इंटरस्टेलर, वी कांट मेक एन ओपेनहाइमर, but we can make stories that are, because of the global markets and because of the capitalist world that we live in, it is difficult to do that. We can't compete with that sort of like budget, financial budget, but we can tell stories that are much more impactful by keeping it simple, right? Another reason is even complicated stories, or complicated is within quotes, even complicated stories are simple stories. So for example, have you seen Inception, Interstellar, Oppenheimer? Have you seen Nolan? If you've seen, because I think tech people are very invested in Christopher Nolan, because he's a filmmaker who does a lot of things around science fiction, around very complex concepts, right? So Interstellar or Inception, maybe those may appear like very complicated films, but at the heart they are still very simple films, because they are rooted in very everyday emotions. For example, Interstellar is about a father-daughter relationship. Ultimately, it is about love and how love allows Matthew McConaughey's character to sort of transcend, the interstellar space and so on. Inception is also the same. Inception is about a couple which is having troubles, and it is also about a father and son, जो Killian Murphy का character है, that they are having troubles amongst them, and how he comes to terms with his father and so on, right? So yeah, this point, littleness, is basically about keeping it simple, realizing how even complex stories are rooted in simple emotions, right? Sixth is conciseness. Conciseness, very literal word. Can somebody tell me what conciseness is? Short and simple, yeah, great. Short and simple. Basically, conciseness means saying a lot of things in very few words. Basically, how much you can say in very little words. And this should appeal to you, for those of you who are interested in, let's say, a marketing career or advertising career, because conciseness is very important in advertising. This is one of the most looked up ads in the advertising world. This is for Rolls-Royce, written by Ogilvy. At 60 miles an hour, the loudest noise in this new Rolls-Royce comes from the electric clock. That's a wonderful line, right? At 60 miles an hour, the loudest noise in this new Rolls-Royce comes from the electric clock, meaning that it's so quiet that only the clock is what you hear. Brilliant ad in the newspaper by Ogilvy. Here's another ad. Avis is only number 2 in rent-a-cars, so we try harder. So basically, Avis was the second biggest renting car facility company in America. They were behind Hertz in terms of numbers, basically. So they made this whole campaign rooted in this sort of underdog identity, where they said, we are number 2, but we try harder. Read this wonderful ad. Avis is only number 2 in rent-a-cars, so why go with us? We try harder. When you're not the biggest, you have to. We just can't afford dirty ashtrays, or half-empty gas tanks, or worn wipers, or unwashed cars, or low tires, or anything less than seat adjusters that adjust, heaters that heat, defrosters that defrost. Obviously, the thing we try hardest for is just to be nice, to start you outright with a new car like a lively super talk Ford and a pleasant smile. To know, say, where you get a good pastrami sandwich in Duluth. Why? Because we can't afford to take you for granted. Go with us next time. The line at our counter is shorter. That's a wonderful way to end it. We are second best. Come to us because the line at the counter is shorter. Yeah. So basically, the idea in advertising is always how much can you say and how little. And it's not just in advertising, social media pe now, with attention span and so on. How much can you say and how little. But it's also there in like larger forms of art, like in novels, in cinema, for example. You might have, and you guys are quite young, but you might have heard of this at least partially. Wait one second. I was telling you, guess in novels or literature, maybe conciseness is there. And let me first present a story by Ernest Hemingway. It's a story in 6 words. 6 words. A story in 6 words. Okay, let's read this. For sale, baby shoes, never worn. And that's a story by Ernest Hemingway. Very poignant, very beautiful. Basically, the idea is, if it's not clear to you, a couple had a child and they bought shoes for that baby, but the baby probably died in infancy or during childbirth, so the shoes were never worn. And so now you have for sale baby shoes, never worn. Just 6 words. That's what it takes to tell a story, and Ernest Hemingway can do that. His style has always been he will take very He'll write very concisely, very economically. So if you like this, you might like Ernest Hemingway in general. But basically, my idea was that conciseness is not just in advertising, it is there in every art form. Good artists are always able to say so much in so little, right? Sabrina Carpenter, I think I like some of her work, but I think her writing is definitely good in some of the, even in the pop songs, even the popular ones. Like Heartbreak is one thing, but My Ego is another. So things like that will instantly connect with you and be like, oh yeah, it's one thing to have that. Even Leve, if you listen to jazz music, Leve has some brilliant lyrics. But basically, yeah, conciseness is there in every single art form. You might have seen this, well, at least you might have heard of this film from Diwar, Mere Paas Maa Hai. It's become a sort of a meme or a fun thing, but it's actually a wonderful dialogue. So what happens is Amitabh Bachchan and Shashi Kapoor, they are two brothers who grow up to have very different lives. Amitabh Bachchan basically becomes a criminal, and Shashi Kapoor becomes a police officer. And Amitabh Bachchan says कि तुम्हारे पास क्या है कि मेरे पास. He's basically telling him they used to live under a pull, they used to live under a bridge, and they've come together to the same place now. And Amitabh Bachchan is basically saying कि तुम्हारे पास क्या है, तुम्हारे पास कि मेरे पास बैंक बैलेंस है, मेरे पास गाड़ी है, बंगला है, and so on and so forth. And it's not as silly as the memes make it sound. It's a very good conversation because he's basically telling him कि what is the point of your principles. There's a very beautiful dialogue. He says कि तुम्हारे उसूलों को गोंद के 2 वक्त की रोटी भी नहीं बनेगी. मतलब if you take all of your principles, you won't be able to get food for 2 times, right? And the final outcome of that, the final crescendo of that is Amitabh Bachchan says कि मेरे पास गाड़ी है, बंगला है, bank balance, and so on and so forth. And in the end, Shashi Kapoor says मेरे पास माँ है. And by that, he means कि mother is with me, of course, their mother is living with him. But in a more symbolic sense, his meaning is that I am right. The sense of rightness, rightfulness, morality is with me. The mother is with me. The mother is sort of like a mother is not just because mother is right and I am right. I'm doing what I'm doing is right. So that's what I meant by conciseness. That you can tell so much in just a few words, right? Uske baad, we'll come to the 7th and the last word, which is journey. Journey, you know what journey is. Going from one point to another. Basically, that there's an element of a ride or taking the audience on a journey from point A to point B. ऐसा नहीं हो सकता कि एक static हम उसी point पे थे और वहीं पे रहे. We are taking them on a ride, right? And we can look at this from there are a lot of these narrative structures that you might have heard of in storytelling and writing. One of this is called freight act experiment. This is called the 3-act structure, and they seem a little complicated. They're very simple. Honestly, they're basically about कि first act में ये होता है, second act में, third act में. First act में usually there's an inciting incident. Have you seen The Last of Us, the show or the video game? I'm a big fan of the video game. I hope some of you have at least played it because it's a beautiful game. Last of Us में, it's very easy to put it into 3 acts. What happens is first the infection spreads and Joel is trying to take care of his daughter Sarah. But if you've seen the show or if you've played the game, in the first episode, like right at the start, Sarah dies. She's killed by a soldier who thinks that they're both infected. And then 20 years later, Joel becomes a smuggler and he's living in this sort of post-apocalyptic world. And he meets Ellie and he realizes that Ellie is immune. She's immune to this infection and he reluctantly agrees to escort her, right? One of the good things in video games, by the way, is that the first act will also have gameplay mechanics. If you played video games which are story driven, you'll realize that you will also not just get the story, but you'll also get, oh, this is the button that you use to run, this is the button that you use to jump, and so on. They'll do it, especially Neil Druckmann, he's a very good director. He's made Uncharted and other stuff. If you played Red Dead Redemption also, it will be similar. Basically, उसमें story के साथ-साथ आपको gameplay mechanics भी मिलते हैं. But first act हो गया. Second act में होता है कि Joel and Ellie, they go throughout this landscape, through zombies infested places, and they slowly bond together. They become closer and closer to each other. And then they both assist each other at times. Sometimes Ellie will help him get over certain obstacle. Sometimes Joel will assist Ellie. And ultimately, they're basically trying to reach the fireflies. The story is कि Ellie को fireflies तक ले जाना है, and they might be able to make a cure for the pandemic, basically, because Ellie is immune. And he manages to take her to the fireflies, but the fireflies tell him कि Ellie को मारना पड़ेगा. We have to kill Ellie to make a cure. That is the only way to make a cure. And now there is this huge moral choice for Joel, right? Do I save this girl? Do I save her and not save the world? Or do I let her die and save the world? So there's this huge moral choice. And he, of course, he saves Ellie and he kills the fireflies, and that is The Last of Us. But you see the exact parallelism. He's trying to save his daughter, Sarah, in the first act. In the final act, he has come to feel the same feelings for Ellie. Ellie has sort of become his daughter, and now he's saving her in a very similar manner. The point is that throughout the story, these feelings, because of their journey, they become sort of like, they have this father and daughter relationship. They develop this relationship, right? तो point story का ये है कि जो हमने पीछे ये सारे जो narrative structures we saw these narrative structures. Last of Us, pretty much every story in the world follows this sort of structure. You have an exposition where you're basically telling the audience कि this and that, like setting आप दिखा रहे हो कि ऐसी चीजें हो रही हैं. And then there's an inciting incident. An inciting incident is basically something happens that makes you go out in the world, take some action. He discovers that Ellie is immune and he has to take her to the fireflies to probably get a cure. So that is the inciting incident. And then you have this whole journey. You have a lot of sequences where they're fighting and so on and so forth. Then there's a action rises. Ellie is kidnapped by somebody and somehow she manages to escape. Finally, there's a climax. The climax in Last of Us is the moral choice, where Joel has been told that he can either save Ellie or he can save the world. The climax happens and then you go to the denouement, which is basically the story का जो end part है कि हाँ ठीक है सब कुछ सही हो गया, everybody is happy, everybody goes home. That is basically how it works. But the idea here is that there are these structures that most stories follow, and you don't have to necessarily, look them up or follow them strictly. But the idea is that something incites the protagonist to take action, and those actions lead to a climax, and the climax is ultimately something that leads to growth. Growth होता है एक certain journey का यही मतलब था मेरा कि आप A point पे कुछ और थे और B point पे आप कुछ और. You have had certain change in who you are, right? So that is the idea of journey and growth. That is pretty much it. अभी हमने Adele का गाना सुना था जिसमें 3 different verses थे. The idea there was dynamism, the change, और ये सारी चीजें होती हैं. But even in music, you will see that the change is always within a structure, right? So the key of the song will most likely be the same. It will always be in a similar key, same notes, जो 7 notes हैं, उन्हीं को use करेंगे. Or the rhythm will still be the same. The rhythm of the song is 135 beats per minute, and that whole song will be within the same rhythm. Otherwise, it'll just be very chaotic, right? Art is a river with a flow. It's not a flood of chaos. It's not just कि बस हमें change दिखाना है तो बस करते जाएंगे. There will still be a structure. So the idea of journey was this, that there is a certain structure to the kind of changes that we are showing, right? So those are the 7 words essentially, that there is variety, but the variety is within a structure, right? फिर इसके बाद, this is basically what makes a good story. I don't think we have time for it. So I'll just basically say that stories, like people, we focus, there are certain external appearances. There are things like, okay, visual quality and so on and so forth, dialogues, वो सारी चीजें होती हैं. But ultimately what we are looking for in a good story is soul. We are seeing sincerity. If something is sincere, we enjoy that craft, right? So Bob Dylan, for example, he's not a very good singer. If you've heard of Bob Dylan, if you've heard of Passenger, if you've heard of Jocelyn Royal, they're not conventionally good singers, right? But we love their craft because of their sincerity, which they bring in their writing, in their music, and so on and so forth, right? And so that's why one of the things that I always tell people is that art can be great without being good. And that's a idea that I really believe strongly in, that you don't have to be very skillful. Art is not all about craft. A lot of it is just soul. If you can do it instinctively, if you can do it with sincerity, and you can do it with conviction, then it's gonna appeal to people. So all of those ideas that we have discussed today, they are there and they might help you in some ways, but don't be too obsessed with them. Realize that a lot of good writing is just instinctual. It's what we've developed over years and what we just feel like doing at that point.